Hello everybody, I'm going to do a complete walkthrough of the 1.1 trigonometry review. Feel free to fast forward through any of the problems that you think you already got correct and just focus on the ones that you need help with. Okay, number one says give the complement and supplement of an angle measuring 48 degrees. So what you do is, again, if you don't have this copy, you can just write this on separate paper. So for part A, you're going to take 90 minus 48. And for part B, you're going to write down 180 minus 48. Remember, complement is 90, supplement is 180. Okay, so go ahead and calculate that out and write down your responses. The next question is asking you to find the measure of each angle. So I'm going to start by noticing that these are supplementary angles. They add up to 180. So I'm going to list the angles, just I'm going in order. 7x plus 19, and I'm adding that to 2x minus 1, and all of that will equal 180. This is a line. Go ahead and solve the equation. Combine like terms. Go ahead and continue solving the equation. As you're watching this, feel free to pause it. If I'm writing too fast, you can always pause the video and then restart it when you've got the equation solved. Okay, now one thing that some of you are doing is you're stopping once you have the x value. The directions for this question, though, say find the measure of each angle. So don't forget you have to plug it in back over here. Okay, so this is where a calculator would come in handy. Go ahead and multiply out 7 times 18 and then add 19. In order to check your answers, you can add these two solutions up and you will see that they add up to 180 degrees. So 145 and 35 degrees are your two angles. Question 3, you'll notice that this is a 90-degree angle. So when you set this one up, make sure you're saying that it equals 90. Go ahead and combine your like terms. And again, if you need to pause the video so that you can try it, remember this is a review, so you should be able to do these questions. If you get stuck, this should help you as I walk through it. Find your x value. Don't forget, you're not stopping here. You have to also plug it back in to find the angles. So go ahead and do that. And one way to quickly check is you should be able to add these up and they should equal whatever you originally started with. So this was a 90-degree angle, so add those together and they do equal 90. So this is addition of degrees and minutes. So the first thing that I did was I went ahead and I lined up the degrees and the minutes in their own separate columns. Once you have it lined up, you're just adding up the columns. So go ahead and add up your columns. Double check that your minutes column, the smallest column, is not greater than 60. Since it's not, then you have your answer. So with this question, we're subtracting. So I went ahead and lined them up, and I'm going to start trying to subtract. But if you look at the first column here, and you try to subtract the 18 minus 27, let's see what happens here. you'll notice that you end up with a negative number, and you should never have a negative number in the seconds or the minutes column. So what I'm going to have to do instead is I'm going to have to borrow a degree. So this was originally 51 degrees. I'm taking one out, so that will leave me with 50 degrees. So I had 51, take one out, that's 50. That 1 degree, if you remember, is equal to 60 minutes. So that 1 degree that I took out, I'm going to add 60 over here. I already had some minutes, so you need to add them together. And so this would be now 78. Now go ahead and do the subtraction. Since your minutes column is less than 60, then this is considered reduced, and this is your final answer. Oops. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So in this question, when I line it up, you'll see that I have this missing piece of information. So I'm going to add in my minutes as 0. So in order to subtract, I'm going to have to borrow a degree. There was originally 180. I'm taking one out, so that leaves 179. And then that gives me 60 minutes. Go ahead and subtract. And since your minutes are less than 60, then your answer is simplified. Okay, same deal. Go ahead and line these up and we will subtract. In this example, you're going to have to add in zeros for the minutes and for the seconds. So now I'm going to have to borrow, but in order to subtract here, I can't borrow from the minutes column. So I'm actually going to have to go all the way over to the degrees column. So I'm going to take out a degree. That leaves you with 89. That adds in 60 minutes here. And now I can borrow to get to the seconds column. So I have 0 seconds, but I'm going to borrow from the minutes. Remember, 1 minute equals 60 seconds. So if I borrow one of these minutes that I now have, that's going to take out 1. It leaves you 59. Then that means I'm going to gain 60 seconds. Okay, go ahead and subtract each column. And just double check your smallest unit. This middle one should never be negative or greater than 60. If it is, you just made a mistake. And notice this is less than 60, so we're completely simplified. Okay, so I'm converting. This is degrees and minutes. I'm going to bring out my full degrees and my full minutes. To change this into a decimal, rounding to the nearest thousandth, I'm going to divide by 60. Go ahead and divide it out and round to the nearest thousandths. That's 3 numbers after the decimal if needed. This one doesn't have thousandths, so you can just leave it like that. Okay, I split up the degrees and minutes and seconds. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and divide. So the first one, you know, as we did in this last question, divide the minutes by 60. There are 60 minutes in a degree. And the seconds, remember, were a little bit different. For every degree, there are 60 minutes, and every minute there were 60 seconds. So when you divide the seconds, you're always dividing by 3,600. So go ahead and divide these numbers out, and then you're going to round it to the nearest thousandths place if needed. So this first number I got was 0.3. And now I'm going to go ahead and divide out the second one. So again, this is tenths, hundredths, thousandths. I'm going to round this to 0.016. Combine your parts of a degree and then bring down your whole degrees. And in order to combine these two decimals, I just added them up. So there was my part of a degree and then my whole degrees. So the directions for this part say to convert to degrees, minutes, seconds. So we're starting with the decimal and we're going to end up with degrees and minutes and seconds if applicable, so if needed. So I'm going to start by splitting it up, and I'm going to multiply by the number of minutes in a degree. This will give me the minutes. So go ahead and go to your calculator and type. So I got 15 minutes. I brought down my 52 degrees. So then you can see that this one is 52 degrees and 15 minutes. Okay, let's look at the next one. Go ahead and split them up, the whole and the parts of a degree. So just like in the last one, the first thing you want to do is figure out how many minutes. So multiply by 60 minutes. And go ahead and type this into the calculator. So I'm just going to write down this entire number because it is to the thousandths place and the directions say it around like that. So I'm writing down the 19.776. Still have the 73 degrees. So think about what this means. This means you have 19 minutes and 0.776 will be your seconds, which we have to figure out. So now I'm going to bring those out before I calculate. So see how I brought out that part of that minute there? So I have one last thing to do here. I'm going to multiply everything, well, this part, the decimal part, by 60. And I'm going to multiply it by 60 seconds because I want to figure out how many seconds that I'm actually dealing with. Okay, so go ahead and type that into your calculator. So I just have to decide what the nearest second would be. So if you think about money and you have $46.56, you would say that that's closer to $47 than it is to 46. So this would be 47 seconds. If you're given one angle and you're trying to find the supplement or complement, those are the questions where you're doing 90 minus or 180 minus. Supplement is 180 degree total, so I went ahead and set it up here. Put in your zeros. Remember, you can pause the video as needed and go ahead and borrow and solve. Okay, so I had to take a degree out. That gave me 60 minutes, and now you're going to subtract each column. So if you're just writing this on a sheet of paper, some of you don't have the hard copy of this review sheet. If you're writing this on a sheet of paper, you just need to show the work and then just write down the letter that it matches with. So this one would match with letter C. Okay, now this is complement, so start by setting it up the same way as the previous problem, except now it's 90 instead of 180. So I've got it lined up here, and I'm going to add in the zeros where there are no minutes and where there are no seconds. So remember, this is one where you're going to have to borrow twice. So I'm going to start by borrowing from the degree column. Take one out. That's going to leave us with 89. I'm going to gain 60 minutes. Okay, now we're getting closer. Now we need to borrow to get the seconds column. So I'm going to borrow from the minutes. Borrow 1. That's going to leave me 59. And that gives me 60 seconds. Go ahead and subtract each column. And you will see that your answer matches letter A. Okay, so this is one where you're finding the angles. So you need to look and see if this is 90 or 180. This is a 90 degree angle, so they're complements. So go ahead and set them up as an equation. 4r plus 5r equals 90. Combine your like terms and then solve. Don't forget, though, that this is not the final answer. You have to take this 10 and plug it back into each one of these angles. So I got 40 and 50. If you add them back together, they equal 90, and that would match with letter C. Supplementary. Okay, so supplementary, remember, means you're equaling angles up to 180. So go ahead and take the first angle plus the second angle equals 180. So go ahead and write that on your paper. Combine like terms. Go ahead and solve for x. So don't forget the most important step, taking this x value and plugging it back into these original angles. So I plugged it in here, and go ahead and calculate out those numbers. And you could check your answer. Those two add back up to 180, so that would make a supplementary angle, so that would make sense. Okay, next one is performing the calculation. Go ahead and line up the unit. So once you have it lined up and you combine or you add up your total for your columns, you will notice that this answer, 104, is actually a number that's greater than 60. So it needs to be reduced. So don't fall into the trap of picking this letter D here. This 104 needs to be reduced. So keep in mind, there are 60 minutes and there are 60 degrees, 60 minutes in a degree. 1 minute or 1 degree equals 60 minutes. Sorry about that. So what I can do is I can subtract out these extra minutes. Okay, so I'm reducing this minutes column by subtracting 60. The 60 minutes doesn't just go away. 60 minutes is equal to a full degree, so you need to add that degree over to this column. So again, you're taking out the extra 60 and then adding that degree to that column. Go up and check your answer and select the correct one, which in this case is letter C. So line it up and subtract. Again, you will notice that when you try to subtract the minutes column, 27 minus 30 will give you a negative answer for the minutes. And you cannot have negative minutes or seconds. So I have to go over here and borrow a degree. That's going to add 60 minutes to the minutes that I already have. So go ahead and add those up. And then once you have that added, go ahead and subtract each column. So this would give you letter C. Go ahead and split out your degrees and minutes and seconds. And we're taking this exact measurement and turning it into a decimal. So you're going to need to divide. Remember, when you're dealing with minutes, you are dividing by 60. There's 60 minutes in a degree. And when you're dividing your seconds, there are 3,600 seconds in a degree. Okay, go ahead and divide this in your calculator, rounding to the thousandths place. Actually, change that. This direction set says hundredths place, so you're going to round to two numbers after the decimal. So again, the directions say hundredth, so I'm going to round this to two numbers after the decimal, 0.83. For the seconds, I'm going to round it to 0.01. This one says hundredth. If it was thousandths, you would do 0.012. This is hundredths, so 0.01. So the issue that I found with this problem is that even though the directions told you to round to the hundredths place, your answer, as you can see, does not match any of the choices. It's close to 10.85 and to 10.86, but it's not exactly there. So what I did was I thought, all right, what if instead of rounding to 0.833 or to 0.83, what if I had rounded to the thousandths place, 0.833? And what if I had rounded this one to 0.012? When I added those two numbers together, I got 0.845, which would round up to 0.85. So even though the directions are telling you the hundredths place, it's probably going to be wiser to round these still to the thousandths, because then when you add them, it will give you the 0.845, which would round up to the 0.85. Okay, so then this would be letter C. So just kind of a little tip there. You might want to stick with the thousandths and then just round your final answer to that place that they're asking for. So the final answer then would be rounded to 10.85. Okay, so here we're converting to degrees, minutes, and seconds. Go ahead and split out your whole degrees and your part of a degree. I'm going to take this part of a degree and multiply by the number of minutes in a degree. Go ahead and go to your calculator and type that in. So this indicates that I have 19 full minutes and 2/10 of a second. So I'm going to bring out what I know. I know that I have 104 full degrees. I have 19 full minutes. And this 0.2 will be my seconds. To figure out how many seconds that's going to be, I'm going to multiply that by 60 seconds. So go ahead and go to your calculator and type that in. Okay, and you can see that I got 12 seconds, which is an exact amount of seconds. So then there is my final answer, and it's letter C. The very last topic that we covered in section 1.1 was coterminal angles. Coterminal angles are formed when you rotate around 360 degrees one way or the other. So to find an angle of least positive measure, I can take the 374 and subtract 360. If I add 360, that's just going to give me a bigger number. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 360. So do that yourself now. So when I subtracted, I got 14 degrees, and that's letter D. So this is a negative number to start with. So if I want to find a positive answer, I'm going to add 360. So go ahead and do that calculation. Add those numbers together. I got positive 274 degrees, which is letter C. Okay, the very last question. A wheel makes 192 revolutions per minute. How many revolutions does it make per second? So I have 192 revolutions, and it's doing that amount of revolutions every minute. Now the question is, how many is that per second? So there's several different ways that you could do this. You could set up a proportion and solve it, or you can just use the fact that every minute is a certain number of seconds, and I can just plug that right in there. So for this one, 192 revolutions is 60 seconds. So I can just simply divide. So go ahead and divide that in your calculator. And I got 3.2. So it's 3.2 revolutions per second. This completes the complete review walkthrough for section 1.1. So this is the material that you need to study. Make sure you know how to do all of these problems for section 1.1. Have a great day.